It's that point of the season, it's summer, we're starting to go to tracks that we've already been to this year. It's that final push to make the playoffs, and there are some big name drivers right there on the playoff cut line. Who's in trouble? Who should be feeling pretty good? We're going to talk about all that and more on today's episode. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. I got my green screen back, everybody. I'm not in my car this week. Woohoo! I know you guys missed the car. Don't worry, we'll be back there probably at some point. But in today's episode, I want to focus on talking about the playoff grid, the playoff bubble, the point standings. We're, 19 races into the season, I believe? So we got about 7 races until the playoffs start. It's that final month and a half push to make the playoffs. And there are a lot of big name drivers and big name teams. Teams that are used to making the playoffs that currently don't find themselves in that situation. Drivers who are used to making the playoffs that don't find themselves in that spot right now. There are a lot of big names around that playoff cut line. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. See who's trending up, who's trending down, who should be worried, and who should be feeling pretty good. That's what I wanted to talk about mostly today. But first, a couple quick tip-ins, news related. First quick thing I saw was in a USA Today article about Kurt Busch winning this last weekend. First win of the year for Chip Ganassi Racing, minus the All-Star race. The fact that Kurt Busch left the powerhouse team, Stewart-Haas Racing, last year to go to Chip Ganassi, and the fact that he already has a win this year and Stewart-Haas Racing does not. That whole type of stuff. But one little thing I saw in that article that some of you guys sent to me, Matt McCall, the crew chief for Kurt Busch, was quoted in that article saying, "We have a wheelman now," referring to Kurt Busch, complimenting how he's a wheelman, I guess, and they love working for Kurt Busch. But a lot of people saw this kind of as a slight. I shouldn't say a lot. Some people, I guess, saw this as a slight to guys like Jamie McMurray, who drove this car last year and didn't make the playoffs. I think this is just, people just like to look for drama, but it was interesting. Jamie McMurray was always a solid driver, maybe slightly overrated, but he did win some big races, driving for some pretty decent teams. But I don't see this really as a huge slight to McMurray. It might have just been a slip of the tongue. McMurray, still ran a race this year, Daytona, the 500, with Chip Ganassi Racing, or was at least a car affiliate with Chip Ganassi Racing. So I don't think that the team and McMurray are on bad terms or anything. But anyway, some people thought that was interesting. That was just one thing I wanted to throw in there. I mainly just wanted to talk about Kurt Busch again, because that one team and what he's done with that team is remarkable this year. Another kind of interesting detail, Hailie Deegan, K&N Series driver, just turned 18, which means she's now eligible to run super speedway races, possibly in the trucks or wherever, maybe in the next year or so. But I also noticed her Twitter seemingly got hacked or deleted or something, so her Twitter account was on the fritz earlier today, so we'll see if that comes back. Good chance maybe she just got hacked. A lot of attention being given to her these days. You never know, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Just an added detail to fill the news week this week. But other than that, not a whole lot of big news this week. No real bombshells. I saw a couple drivers revealed some throwback schemes for Darlington. I saw Paul Menard's, but we'll talk about that more when Darlington gets closer. So what I want to do today is I want to look at the playoff grid first and foremost. I want to see who's safe, because there's 8 drivers with wins this year that are basically locked in. A couple other drivers that are really good, sitting well, high up in points, so they're probably good as well. But there's a lot of drivers, big name drivers, right around that bubble line. That's what I want to focus on today. And I kind of going to go by individually and talk a little bit about kind of if they're trending up, trending down, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and look at the point standings right now, and as you can see, it stacks them, based on wins. Guys with wins jump to the top. That's why Harvick's a little further down here, but this shows you the playoff grid, and most notably, this shows you the cut line over there around 16th place. We've had 9 different winners. Justin Haley's not on there because he's not a full-time driver, and that team's not even in the top 30 in points and owners' points, so they're kind of irrelevant. But I guess including Justin Haley, we've had 9 different winners this year, but there's only 7 races left, and since Haley's not going to make the playoffs, even if 7 different winners who haven't won this year win these next races, there will still be 1 driver making it in on points, because that would only fill 15 of the 16 slots. But yeah, let's look at these playoff standings a little bit. Obviously, the top 8 there with wins are all locked in. Joe Gibbs Racing, you see their 2 guys top of the board. Penske not far behind. And then if we look, Kevin Harvick, 9th place. He's the first guy without a win, but you see that he's 174 points above the cutoff line. Kevin Harvick's safe. Kevin Harvick's making the playoffs, no questions asked. Eric Almirola, Ryan Blaney are definitely sitting pretty well right now. It's going to take a couple bad finishes in a row probably to put their playoff hopes in jeopardy. I want to stop and talk about William Byron for a second there. 12th in points. That is a huge improvement over last year. Last year, that 24 car, I know he had a different crew chief. He was not working with the GOAT, Chad Knaus, but William Byron last year was 23rd in points at the end of the season. 23rd as a rookie, which, as a rookie, cut him some slack. That 24 car used to be the 5 car, which hadn't been too good for a couple of years, so I cut William Byron some slack. 23rd points place finish, not terrible, but to go from 23rd a year ago all the way up to 12th, and we're more than halfway through this season, that is a huge increase. I think that should not go unnoticed. Chad Knaus is definitely a big help, I'm sure, but I think William Byron is now starting to show this year some of that, skill that we saw in the trucks and Xfinity series when he was tearing up those series, we're like, dang, this kid's got something for the future. We're finally starting to see glimpses of that, I think, this year on the Cup Series side of things. He's qualifying really well this year. He's already got a few pole awards, which is outstanding. And they're starting to figure out Sunday. They're starting to figure out how to put together a full race, you know, from lap 1 to lap 500. That was Byron's issue last year, I felt like. I felt like he would start races strong and then fade and finish 20th at the end of the day. This year, they've toned that back a little bit. They'll start strong and maybe finish 15th, which isn't great, but it's better than last year when they were finishing 25th. So they're small gains, but they're starting to figure it out. I wouldn't be shocked to see him win a race this year. I think, especially what we've seen with Alex Bowman, he's come on strong. Chase Elliott has a win this year. Hendrick Motorsports is starting to pick things up. If William Byron wins a race this year, I would not be shocked. He's starting to show that kind of speed. But let's keep moving here. Kyle Larson, 40 points up, still a pretty good cushion. You know, he's probably not going to give all that up in 1 week. He'd have to have a pretty catastrophic day to fall into the clutches of guys like Newman and Suarez after just one bad race. So Kyle Larson starting to pick things up. I think that all-star race win definitely boosted his confidence. I think that boosted that entire team, because now since then Kurt Busch has a win. I think Chip Ganassi Racing's really feeling themselves after that all-star race, because that was a huge performance for that 42 team and all of Chip Ganassi Racing. Now I want to focus on the drivers below Kyle Larson, the Clint Bowyers, the Johnsons, the Joneses, all those guys at the bottom of the playoff grid, and also those currently on the outside looking in. That's who I want to focus on here. I'm going to go down the line and talk about each one of these guys because, yeah, like I said earlier, I want to see who's on the rise, who's maybe struggling right now, and it could get interesting because we only have about a month and a half before the playoffs start. And I will say this. I've never been a huge fan of NASCAR extending the playoff grid to include 16 drivers. You know, when it first started, there was 10, then they kind of let 12 in, then they let 13 in that 1 year. And then with this current format, 16 drivers make it in, which I'm fine with, but it's not my personal preference. But I will say this about that. Because they now let in so many drivers and teams into the playoffs, that threat of missing the playoffs, honestly, I think that puts more pressure on people. Because in the early days of the chase, you know, if you finished 11th or 12th in points, I mean, that's still a pretty good year. You didn't make the playoffs, sure, that's disappointing, but that's still not a bad year, finishing 11th or 12th in points, depending on who you are. But nowadays, because they let so many drivers in the playoffs, I think all these teams expect to be in contention. And if you do miss the playoffs, you finish 17th or 18th, not only do you miss the playoffs, but 17th or 18th is not that great of a season for most people. So I think there's actually more pressure on these guys around the cut line, because if you fail to make it in the playoffs when they let 16 drivers in, that doesn't look very good for you. But yeah, let's go down the line here. Clint Bowyer's the first one here. He is only 10 points above the cut line. Clint Bowyer, guy who won twice last year. Stewart-Haas Racing last year was the best team in NASCAR. This year they've been a half step slower, I'd say, but still been pretty competitive. Bowyer does not have a win this year, but he's been competitive. But Clint Bowyer has been in a pretty big slump. He had a top 10, a 6th place finish at Kentucky this last week, but that was his first top 10 in more than a month, like a month and a half. Pocono was the last time he finished in the top 10, and since that, in that time span, he's gone from 10th in points, he slid down here now to a tie for 14th in points, only 10 points above the cut line. You know, a month and a half ago, we were still feeling pretty good about Clint Bowyer. Figured he'd make it into the playoffs without much issue, but this bad break, this slump he's been in has put those hopes in jeopardy. And it's been reported that this could be a contract year for Clint Bowyer. That, I think, only adds to the pressure he's feeling. If he misses the playoffs, that 14 car could look pretty good for maybe a Cole Custer or maybe somebody else we haven't talked about. In my video earlier this week, we established that Clint Bowyer is one of the top 10 highest paid drivers in NASCAR. If you're going to be a top 10 highest paid driver, you got to perform like a top 10 driver in NASCAR. And right now, sitting there 14th in points, can't feel too good for Clint Bowyer. Let's talk about the 7-time champion sitting there in a tie with Clint Bowyer, I guess, but 15th in points, Jimmie Johnson. He is also only 10 points ahead of 17th. This is the only driver who has made the playoffs or the chase every single year it's been implemented. Last year he cut things a little close, and in 2019 though, he's right there on that bubble. Jimmie Johnson, bad break here or there, and he could be on the outside looking in. And now just a few weeks ago, he was on the outside looking in. He was 17th in points after Sonoma, but he started to make a better push recently. He had top 5s at Chicago and at Daytona. Kentucky was bad. He finished 30th. He had some issues, hit the wall and everything. So Kentucky was kind of a step backwards, but he's starting to trend forward. Kind of like I said earlier with Hendrick Motorsports generally, and I would say Chevy too, with Ganassi making some gains lately. Chevrolet has started to really just improve across the board. Chase Elliott's getting wins. Alex Bowman's looking like a contender. William Byron's winning the pole every other week. Jimmie Johnson is working with a rookie crew chief this year, Kevin Mendering. We've talked about it already. So that could be part of why he struggled a little bit this season, but things are trending upward. Those top 5s at Chicagoland and Daytona are good, and you know, we've got some big fast tracks coming up that Jimmy has been good at this year, so I think things look good for Jimmie Johnson. A couple weeks ago, I wasn't sure if things looked good for Jimmy, but right now he might sneak in. Now, Erik Jones isn't the biggest name in NASCAR, but he's certainly driving for one of the biggest and best teams, Joe Gibbs Racing. I just talked about a minute ago how Joe Gibbs Racing, they've won 10 races this year, which is double that of pretty much any other team. Erik Jones, however, has won 0 races, and that's why he finds himself back in 16th. Now, a few weeks ago, Erik Jones was actually looking pretty comfortable, I'd say, in the points. He's been pretty consistent this year when they don't have issues, especially on the mile and a half. He's been good. However, in the Coke 600, Erik Jones blew a tire early on, finished 40th, and that killed him in the points. And ever since that catastrophe, Jones has just been trying to get back in that top 16. He's had top 10s in 3 of the last 4 races, including a 3rd place finish at Kentucky this last week. He's been so good at the mile and a half this year, which I think does bode well if he can make the playoffs, because there's a lot of mile and a halves in there. He's vaulted the 20 car back into playoff consideration. He's back inside the top 16 for the time being. We'll see what happens. I think there is, you want to talk about pressure on guys like Clint Bowyer, there's definitely pressure on Erik Jones as well. He still does not have a contract with Joe Gibbs Racing beyond this year. Christopher Bell's name continues to come up. Erik Jones' side continues to say that they are confident they'll get a deal done with JGR, but until that actually happens, you gotta believe there's some pressure on Erik Jones, and good finishes like he had at Kentucky will help silence some of the critics. So those are all the drivers that are currently in the top 16, but only 2 points outside it right now is a guy I don't think any of us really had, or very few of us, some of us maybe did, but very few of us probably had this guy really as a serious playoff contender coming into this year. But I want to talk about Ryan Newman there, driver of the number 6 car for Roush Fenway Racing. I was looking up stats for this video, and did you know that Ryan Newman, he only has 1 top 5 this year. He does have 7 top 10s, which is double what the 6 car had all of last season with Trevor Bayne and Matt Kenseth. But did you know that Ryan Newman's worst finish this year is only 24th? That's right. He has not finished outside the top 25 in a single race this year. I know he's often running like 15th, 16th, 17th, which isn't great or anything, but you gotta give the guy some respect. He's keeping the car clean, he's avoiding trouble, he's not tearing up his equipment. That was a stunning stat. We're 19 races into the year and he doesn't have a single DNF. 24th is his worst finish this year. And that came all the way back in Las Vegas at the beginning of the year. He's been consistent, the model of consistency. And just like in 2014 when he was with RCR, that consistent nature of his might be enough to help him overachieve this year and make the playoffs. I didn't really expect Newman to run this well. I expected maybe to be a 20th place car most of the year, but he's used that veteran wily wit of his to, I don't know, really steer Roush Fenway back into relevancy. He is a real playoff contender right now, and if they can, he had a top 10 at Kentucky this last week. If they can keep that momentum going, Ryan Newman, man, if something bad break happens to Jones or Johnson or even Bowyer, Ryan Newman and Roush Fenway Racing could knock a Gibbs car out of the playoffs. They could knock a Hendrick car out of the playoffs. They could knock an SHR car out of the playoffs. Didn't see that coming, but Ryan Newman has set himself up into a position where he could do that. So credit to Ryan Newman. We've given a lot of the veteran drivers credit this year, like Kurt Busch going over to Chip Ganassi and making that a championship contender, but Ryan Newman deserves some credit as well for continuing. I think towards the end of last season, Roush Fenway started to look a little better, but Ryan Newman has taken that and run with it, and really he's making him look like a playoff contender, and that's impressive. That deserves to be noted. Now let's look at the guy 18th on the playoff grid. Now Daniel Suarez, I have a little bit more to say. Kind of like with Bowyer or Erik Jones, a few weeks ago, Daniel Suarez was sitting pretty good in the standings. He was up around like 12th, 13th on the playoff grid. He had a pretty decent cushion, driving for that 41 car. You figured if as long as he was consistent, they'd make the playoffs, no big deal. However, in his last 4 races, he only has 1 top 10, so he's sliding. He's even been the victim of kind of a bad luck last place finish at Daytona, getting caught up in someone else's wreck. I still think there's a good chance Daniel Suarez will make the playoffs. He's driving such a good race car, but he's another driver who does not have a guaranteed contract for next season. He could very well be a free agent, and given his struggles the first couple of years with Joe Gibbs Racing, given if he can't make the playoffs with Stuart Haas this year, his once promising Cup Series future might kind of be cut short. But he's only 4 points out, so making the playoffs is definitely a realistic goal at this point. And it's what makes, like, last week in Kentucky very frustrating for guys like Daniel Suarez. Remember, he led basically the entirety of stage 1 up until the first caution. He was leading. And then under that caution, his crew chief, for whatever reason, opted to go with 4 useless tires, and cost him all his track position, and Suarez missed out on probably at least 6 or 7 stage points. Those 6 or 7 points, man, when you're looking at the way the playoff grid's stacking up, those are so valuable. So it makes that really frustrating. Suarez still at the top 10 at Kentucky last week, but man, he could have had so many more points, and we might not be talking the way we are about him right now. If he does not take 4 tires in stage 1 on that pit stop, he likely would still be in the top 16 right now. That's all I'm saying. These stage points, man, these crew chiefs are undervaluing stage points. But of all the guys I've talked about, I know Jimmy Johnson's a 7-time champion. I know Eric Jones is a potential free agent and everything. But of all those guys I just named, the driver probably feeling the most pressure at this point in the season is Daniel Suarez. Because he's driving a car that won a race last year, made it to the round of 8 in the playoffs last year. He's driving that car, a round of 8 car, same crew chief, same equipment, pretty much different rules package, but same everything else, and he is currently 18th in points. That's not good. I know it's tight right there. I know you could easily be in 13th in points if just, you know, that Daytona wreck doesn't happen, but it's just no room for error back there. And now I know Daniel Suarez does have solid funding behind him. Eris is a, you know, a strong partner of his, but you know, they don't sponsor every race. They're not, you know, I wouldn't even say they're a majority sponsor. Like, I feel like the majority of Daniel Suarez races are done without Eris on the hood. So it's not like he just has an endless waterfall of money behind him wherever he goes. So if he can't finish this season strong with Stewart-Haas Racing, good chance his chances of racing in good equipment are going to be done after this year. And that would really be a shame to see. But you look at the top 16 right now, there are a lot of good drivers ahead of Daniel Suarez that also, I think, have a good shot at making the playoffs. Competition's stiff, man. Competition is stiff. Everyone's very equal right now around that playoff grid. But anyway, y'all, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you think Daniel Suarez makes the playoffs? Do you think he misses out? What about Jimmy Johnson? What about Eric Jones? What about Ryan Newman? Can he finish the upset and make the playoffs in that 6 car? What do you guys think will happen? Leave your comment down below. These final 7 races, I know we got some tracks that I'm not super excited for. New Hampshire this weekend will be probably okay. Pocono I'm not looking forward to. Michigan I'm not really looking forward to. But I think the point situation will be extremely interesting to watch over the next month or so. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Thanks for watching as always. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram. Thanks for 92,000 subscribers on here. That road to 100,000 getting a little closer. I'm hoping we can get there by the end of the year, but that's a challenge I put on all of your shoulders. If you're a NASCAR fan, you like the show, spread the word, tell all the NASCAR fans in your life about it, and point them my way, because we love the support over here, and I can't do the show without you guys, so I appreciate that. Big thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters as well. Michael Harrison at you as the stars, Mentally Defective, Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason R. Long, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, Matthew Koulopoulos, Pepe Luscious, Joey DiMicino, Emilio Garcia, Jeremy Conkling, and the rest of these incredible Patreon supporters. I couldn't do this show without the support I get from all of you guys, so thank you very much for going the extra mile and supporting Out of the Group. I really appreciate it. Might have a video up tomorrow. I'm not exactly sure my schedule, but I'll definitely have a video up after Sunday's race at New Hampshire. I'm looking forward to it. Hope you guys are too, and I'll be back at it with some more NASCAR videos very, very soon. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you again very, very soon.